Hello, everyone. This is Sankalp,
And this is Gaurang.
and you're listening to our podcast, The Unwritten Case.
Awesome. So, welcome everyone to our second episode. Today we have Anisha Agarwal on our podcast. So, welcome, Anisha. How's it
Thank
going?
you. It's going well. I'm honored to be guest number two. Very excited.
Welcome.
No, it's going well. EC year has been busy in the best ways. Very different from RC year in a lot of ways. I think it's more controlled busyness and more intentional busyness. But yeah, things are good.
Yeah, of course. What's your favorite class right now?
Probably. I mean, I've had two classes for it, but entrepreneurial sales is pretty high up there.
Nice.
I don't know if either of you are in that class.
No.
I plan to take that next semester.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal class. We get to do little role plays of buying and selling every class. The professors are incredible. And then we do little I'll be making a comment about how I don't like something someone did, and we'll be like, great, let's go try it out right now, like you and me. And that's awesome. And then we have to do little selling exercises with classmates. Similar to, I think, the way negotiations
Yeah.
work,
Right.
but the difference is that we get assigned a sales coach for the whole semester, and they watch every single one of your videos and then give you feedback on it,
Wow.
which is incredible to have that kind of access. So that's currently in the running to be favorite class of the semester.
Yeah, we
That's
have. I
impressive.
have Mark Roberge for. I think he's one of the e-sales
Yes.
professors. I have him for our IFC.
Okay.
I'm doing the Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
He's really good.
he's awesome.
Yeah, so
I
I'm looking for it. I'm hopefully like I don't know if he'll teach it next semester, but if he does, I'm
I
hoping
think
to get that
he
one.
does. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but
We'll see. Perfect. So I think just getting into things, I think something that we want to learn a little bit more about you is just your life story and how that's brought you into the bringing of who Anisha is today. So maybe if you could just share a little bit more about your childhood and what's got you to where you are today.
yeah, that's a good question because I don't know what's got me to where I am today. I don't even know where I am today. Maybe that's a different existential crisis. I've moved around a lot in my life. So I spent the first 8 years of my life in the United States. So I grew up in Chicago. When I was 8, my family moved to India. And I lived there from 8 to 18. We spent every summer in the opposite country. So from 0 to 8, every summer is spent in India. And then from 8 to 18, every summer is spent back in the US. So I feel like I've really had both my whole life, and I've kind of been straddling both countries my whole life. When I was 18, I moved back to the US for college. So I went to UC Berkeley. From there, went back to Chicago because to me, home in the US is Chicago. It was not a very popular decision for someone in California. But I did it anyway. And then was in Chicago for the last 5.5 years before coming to HBS. So that's my like quick spark notes. In terms of what's brought me here, I don't know. If you had asked 15-year-old Anisha or 18-year-old Anisha or 25-year-old Anisha if I was going to be at HBS today, the answer was probably no. Even when I was applying, the odds were very much not in my favor. And it's kind of surreal to be doing the thing that like 15-year-old me would have lost her mind at. I remember when I applied to business schools, I applied to five, and all five I applied to, I did not apply to undergrad because I didn't think I was good enough to get
Mm.
into any one of them.
Wow.
So to me, that shift of like, wait, I actually feel like these schools are now attainable to me, even in the process, was like crazy. And then to now be sitting at one of them is even crazier.
What do you think was the driving factor behind that?
Behind
Like knowing that you have this, conviction that this is now attainable to you.
It's a good question. I think it probably came from more clarity within myself and like being more sure of who I was as a person. I think growing up, I struggled with that. And I think I was kind of just like bouncing around, which is probably not giving a younger version of myself enough credit. But I think there was less clarity in what I wanted out of life. And, in school, I was never a bad student, but I was never a great student. I never had the greatest grades, even undergrad. Like I did fine. So it was just like never, you know what I mean? Like the first job that everyone wants was never going to be the thing I got. You know what I mean? And then I think for me, work ethic for the first time ever really kicked in when I started my first job.
Mm.
And I don't know why. Like I to this day don't know what possessed me to work my ass off when I went to consulting because I'd never been that person. But I loved it. I loved what I was learning. I liked maybe it was the practicality of what I was doing versus just being in lectures all the time because like I hate that pedantic aspect of school. But that was the first time that I actually started working hard, and I realized that when I really tried, I was able to actually be really good at what I did. Because I'd always relied on my brain to get me decent grades, but it's like brain with hard work is a crazy combo. And I think there was that intentional shift when I entered the workforce, and I feel like it helped me figure out who I was more and what I wanted out of life more.
And do you think this whole, I think, moving from US to India, India to US, and this whole, I think, this change during the childhood made you feel a bit more comfortable with the whole process of change as well?
Yes and no. I hate uncertainty. I hate change. I'm still very much probably I think most people don't like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I still don't like it. I think I sometimes think about, especially right now where we're coming up on another inflection point in our lives with graduation, where I'm like, shoot, like growing up between these two countries is hard. You know what I mean? Like, where do I want to be? Which country do I want to be in? And I sometimes, when I'm in one of my headspaces, will be like, shoot, I wish my parents had just stayed in one place. Like my life would be so much easier. But I think that's like the cop out answer. I don't know. I think it has made me more comfortable with change. I think it's made me realize that some of the most beautiful like learnings and growth in life come out of change and
Mm.
come out of that discomfort.
Mm.
And I almost sound like Reza right now, but I think there was a lot of growth in that. I think it's helped me understand people better. I think I can relate to different types of people more as a function of having to been around those types of people. Like there's a lot of growth for me that came out of that that I didn't realize when it was happening. And I think now looking back at some of that, I'm able to see. So that was a long-winded way of saying it's probably made me appreciate change more.
Mm.
I don't think it's made me like change more.
That's good. You mentioned this ticking time bomb of, I
Yep.
think, graduation. What's your biggest fear?
I don't know if I have a fear. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with it, which, is tough because you're like in this inflection point of again, what am I gonna do? I think I know what I want to do. Um, I guess this goes back to the entire conversation we had right before this of change, right? I think there's no fear because I know that when
Mm.
I'm in uncertainty, I can figure it out. And in my life, there have been a lot of really suboptimal outcomes. And I've somehow managed to get through them and figure it out and navigate those, even if it takes a while. So that's probably why I would say I don't know if there's fear. I think there's nervousness, which is probably somewhat normal with this impending uncertainty. But I don't know if I would say there's much fear attached to it.
Curious. So, as far as I understand, it seems like you're planning to move back to India after MBA.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that is currently the plan. Yes.
Okay. What, define that, like what shapes that decision?
Um, that's a good question, and you guys can see it on my face. They can't hear it. They can't maybe can't hear it. I had a little bit of a grin when I said yes. I would say family is probably the biggest driving force. When I moved back to the U.S. when I was 18 for undergrad, I never thought I was going to go back. When we moved to India when I was 8, I was like, I don't want to be here. I never wanted to be there. I was bullied in middle school and high school. So I had had this like terrible experience with India, and I was like, I don't know why anyone would want to live in this country. Which all respect to India. And I think as I got older, you start to value different things in life. And would go home 2 or 3 times a year, and my experience was different every time, in a positive way, right? The
Mhm.
people that I didn't really like in high school all of a sudden were different. People grow. It's shocking. Um, but I think I started to have a better relationship with the country and my experience there. And then I think the biggest inflection point for me was when I lived in the US. I over the span of like 3 or 4 years, and it's been probably a couple years now, but I've had two grandparents pass away in the last decade of living in the US. And those were big moments where I realized that both my parents needed me and I wanted to be there, and it was going to take me 30 hours to get home. And there was also this realization of, okay, but today I have the ability to just drop everything and go. In 10 years, when I have a family and hopefully children, I don't know that I'm going to have that luxury. Right. So I think that was the big switch in how I thought about it. So the desire to go back to India came from a deeply family oriented place.
Mhm.
I would say there, there's a lot about the US that I like. I've now lived majority of my life in the US. And I would be surprised if I don't always have a little bit of a foot here. I don't fully know what that's going to look like yet. But I know I want it. And I think that when you want something bad enough, you'll figure it out. So that's currently where I stand on the India versus US debate.
I think like this is something I'm personally going through right now as well. So it's really great to hear that from your perspective. But over the last 7 years, like I've been in the U.S. for 7 years
Mhm.
now. Did my undergrad here. Been here since. Every year I say I'm gonna go back,
Yep.
but every year I go back to visit family. That's a little bit less that I have that conviction that I want to go, and the more I get confused with time. The one thing that like is still keeping me confused is the fact that I want to be close to family, right?
Yep.
Just like you said, if anything happens, it's 30 hours,
Yep.
right? I don't want to be in that space,
Yep.
but it's just curious, like especially being in business school for me, it's kind of flipped my mentality behind that because I was putting family at like the utmost pedestal, right? Everything's going to be defined around being close to them,
Mhm.
opportunities lie there, I'll figure it out. But then now that I'm in HBS, now that I learn a lot more about the opportunities that revolve around, the exit post MBA, it that mentality is kind of flipping and it's confusing me even more, where I say, okay, I'm going to extend that stay for another 2 years and then I'll figure it out. And then I'll go and then I'll go. Someone told me, this is a family friend in Michigan. He said, now that you're in the US, you're never going to go back. And I wanted to challenge that notion. And every year I fight that.
Yeah.
But every year I'm just like proving him a little bit right and more
Yeah.
correct. How did you come to that decision? Like it seems like a very, I just want to unpack that a little.
No, yeah, it's an interesting one. I've also had people say that to me a lot. When I moved here when I was 18, people are like, "She's gone. She's never coming back."
Same.
Right? My parents expected that. Like people that hear that I'm moving back now are like, "Whoa, that's crazy." Um, I would say there's never a time where it's going to feel right. It doesn't feel great to me right now either. And that I'm currently grappling with, does that mean that it's the wrong decision? I don't think so. Does that mean that I might be having cold feet because this is like a really big decision? Yeah, potentially. Um, I think there will always be a reason to stay here, right? The US has a lot going on and there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of excitement, and there's really cool job opportunities. I think at some point for me, it came from grounding in what is important to me. And it also came from, to some degree, I'm not getting younger, unfortunately. And my dad, when we moved in 2004, my dad didn't move back full time because he kept his job in the US while running a business in India, which is crazy and a whole other conversation. But he's an incredible man. But so he straddled the two countries even longer than we did. He moved back full time when I was 16. So that was a whole like 8 years after we did. And to this day, he says one of his biggest regrets is keeping a foothold in both for too long because he was like, I never got to give either 100%, and I didn't do 100% to either. And that's like not great. I think he's being hard on himself there. Like, I think he did very well on both aspects, but I understand that, right? Because you're like trying to juggle too many different things. Um, so I don't know. I think for me, it just came from it's never going to feel great. Um, my commitment to myself was actually if I had not gotten into business school, I had a one way ticket to India,
Wow.
which was crazy, and that was like a terrifying thing to do. And then I got into business school and was like, actually, psych, I'm going to shave 2 more years, which has by the way been the trend because I've done what you're describing of like I'm going to move, and then I'm like, but I got this job, and then it's like so I've done that back and forth a lot. But I did, for me, it was coming into business school. I was very clear that if I was ever going to give India a chance, it was now, like right after this. Otherwise, I never will. And I think so. Sorry, I've been talking for a while, but I live this, the way I describe my attitude towards life is I call it a regret minimization
Mhm,
outlook,
mhm.
which is with all the information I have at hand today, what decision do I think is best for me? I have no idea whether or not that's going to be the best outcome, but it's with what I know today. What do I think is the right choice? And what am I going to look back at and be like, I'm proud that I made that decision and I'm going to feel like I did everything I needed to do. And for me, that's India. Like, I think if I did not go to India, I would look back and wonder what life could have been, but I'm not going to regret trying. And if it doesn't go super great, that's fine. Like, I will figure it out and I'll find a way back. Right. And I have enough faith in myself for that. But I think I don't want to look back at 60 with, I'm sure, a perfectly content life here and be like, well, what would life have been if I was with my parents for longer?
This is just like just so interesting to hear this conversation. I came directly, I mean, just like before HBS, I was in India. And I think many of us international students currently who come to HBS, like the way that we decide what we'll do after HBS before we come to HBS is that okay, I think we'll probably stay in US. It gives us it gives us those opportunities, and B, it gives us good lifestyle. I think what I've seen for me and many of those people whom I've been speaking to during an RC year and now this EC year is that there's the third criteria also coming in slowly, which is family,
Mhm.
like coming close to family, want to stay closer to family. I think that maturity that's also coming while being at HPS is also making us rethink of wait, like what, where do we really want? How do we even evaluate
Yeah.
where should we stay? And I think this very well summarized many of the I think this dilemma that's going on many of the second year students at HPS.
What do you have in plan for India next?
Like, what am I going to do when I get there?
Yep.
I'm building a mental health company, which is very exciting. I launched it this summer. It's currently called Lighthouse, TBD on if that's the forever name, but for right now, I like it. It is a mental health company for adolescents because it comes from a place of I think mental health should be preventative, not curative, and I think
Mm.
that starts by giving kids the right toolkits to know how to take care of their own emotions and to understand their own emotions. So it's basically emotional literacy. It's a very science-driven approach. So I studied cognitive neuroscience in undergrad, and a big part of what resonated with me about that field was you understand the science behind your emotions and why how your brain and body react to different stressors.
Mhm.
And I think that takes away a lot of the stigma associated with mental health
Yeah.
and a lot of the stigma associated with emotions and feeling crazy or whatever words people use now. Um, so that's what I'm building. The goal is to keep doing that for the rest of EC year and then go back to a somewhat well, already created and maybe sustainable company. So that's the plan for right now. I don't believe in having a plan B as a founder. So I don't have a plan B. I have no idea what I'm going to do if that doesn't work. But that's okay because I mean, I know myself and I care very deeply about this. So I'm going to try until I physically can't anymore.
You'd make Reza very proud.
I'm telling you guys, I don't know what it is. I think I've like fully bought into his shit.
No, this sounds really cool actually. I think thinking about mental health for adolescents, what made you think for this particular, I think, demographic?
I'm building the company I wish I had had when I was like 15. Um, I have always really enjoyed children. That sounds very weird. I've always enjoyed spending time with children in like a perfectly normal way.
Don't worry, we can cut that out.
Oh my god. I grew up with a lot of nieces and nephews, so I've just always like I think kids bring out like the simple pleasures in life, and I've like all of my biggest stressors in life go away when I'm around children. So like I just have always loved being around that. So I've always spent time in the education space to some degree. The summer before college, I interned teaching 4 to 6 year olds.
Okay.
Sometime during college, I interned with a school psychologist. Like I've always been interested in the space. I thought about doing adult psychology at some point, like targeting the adult market and going the corporate lens. It just didn't feel right to me. Like something about it from like a mission standpoint didn't click. I think there's obviously a lot of value there, and frankly, probably more money. But I think for me, it just came from a place of actually caring about what I'm doing. And yes, I'm
Hmm.
building a for-profit company that would like to make, and I would like to make some money while doing it. But I just, this is something that's so deeply important to me that I don't believe in going about it in a way that I don't think will actually be impactful. Um, and yeah, the adolescent lens came from.
I think that I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, I know that you spent the summer in India,
Yes.
right? And I heard a little bit about this in
Yep.
Reza's class, but for context, we were talking about what is some of the hard, like some of the hard work that you would do, like in person, showing up day in day out, that a typical you would not expect someone typical like a founder to do. And Anisha spent the summer in India, spending time with kids just to learn a little bit more about the challenges there. Could you share or like paint a bit more of a picture about like what the situation is there, and like around mental health, the fact that at least as far as I know, it's a taboo still considered today,
Mhm.
to seek help.
Yeah. I would say India is like the US 5 or 10 years ago. And that's typically been the trend is we adopt a lot of things the US does, but it just takes a while. So India's starting to see the shift towards caring about mental health. People are starting to talk about it. Things have, India has a like I think the leading cause of death in people under the age of 30 in India is suicide, right? Like that's deeply upsetting to me.
Hmm.
And so I spent the summer in India. I was at a private school because that was the easiest to get into at that point. And I spent time with students and teachers, K through 12, so ages 4 to 18. And I ran a bunch of workshops. Shadowed classes where I just sat there and watched. And I understood like how teachers were talking to kids, like what that looked like. And then I did a bunch of workshops for both students and for teachers, centered around whatever the school wanted me to talk about or whatever I saw come up as relevant in our classes. So it was, I mean, I call it customer discovery on steroids. It's interesting because in class it came up in the lens of, what do you do that's hard and not ideal? It's funny, and I didn't get to say this in class, but I actually felt more alive in those moments than I have maybe
Mm.
ever. At which, we talk about passion in class. And I think I've been very fortunate to be one of the people that has found business and passion together. And I do think that's very, very hard to do. And there's probably a lot of luck that came into that for me. But it's interesting because I don't know. I think we don't give enough credit to the fact that when you love what you do, like even if you're not in like the most ideal setting and like it's hard to other people, it might not be as hard to you.
What would you say? So, I mean, I really hope that this, grows to the extent where, everyone has access to
Yeah.
mental health platforms to, really help them, support them through the journey. That being said, it's still a path and it's going
Yeah.
to take a long time.
Yep.
If you were to go back to 15-year-old Anisha,
Yeah.
what would you tell her? How should she handle the situation considering the fact that maybe the resources are not yet there?
Yeah, that's interesting. Ooh, that's a good question. What would I say to 15-year-old Anisha knowing that like without the same resources? I don't know. I mean, I would probably tell her that it's going to be fine and she's going to be fine. I don't know if she would have believed me. Um, but I think I think there's a lot of peace for me in knowing that she had to go through what she was going to go through for me to be where I am today. And I think that's generally the way I look at like struggles in life is and it's very cliche to say, but I think you grow the most in those moments. And I genuinely believe that everything that I have been through has got me to where I am right now. So I don't, I mean, did it suck? Yeah. But like, do I regret it happening? Absolutely not, because I don't know if I would be where I am right now. So I don't know, and I don't believe there's anything, anyone could have said to her in that moment that would have changed how she was feeling, right? Like, sure, maybe I could have had a better toolkit on how to actually like understand my emotions, how to process my emotions, how to act on my emotions. Um, it's also like, it took me a very long time to get to the point where I've made peace and I've had acceptance with, parts of my childhood, but I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of now I feel a lot of peace in knowing that everything that happened is part of why I am where I am right now. It's part of why I care about what I'm building. And it's probably part of, what's going to make me resilient when building this company and everything sucks. Like, it's probably going to be the thing that keeps me going.
Built your judgment?
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit.
Anisha, I think this is really, I think, just cool listening and I think and we are pretty happy that you have found this overlap between your passion and business,
Me too.
which is very difficult to get.
Yes.
What would you tell the first years at HBS who are currently in the midst of just being like thrown under the bus, trying to come out, and yes, after and despite all that we have said that it's okay, it's gonna be okay at the end, and they're thinking about how they kind of chart their life at HBS, thinking about what to do in their careers as well. How should they think about this intersection between finding their passion and wanting to do something with it in their careers as well?
I think my situation's a little unique. And I do think there was a lot of luck that played into me feeling so strongly about about this intersection. Um, it's something I felt passionate about since I was 16 years old. You know what I mean? So like I don't know that a lot of people have that same experience or feel that way about anything from that young of an age. Some people probably do, and that's great. And I think when you know, you know, my entire application to HBS was about building a mental health company. You know what I mean? So it's like something I've been thinking about for a very long time. Um, I would say you can be passionate about different things, and I am going to try not to say what Reza says in class, but like, so my dad built a manufacturing company.
Mhm.
I don't believe for a second that he was passionate about manufacturing. Like, no one really is. Um, but I think that what he was passionate about was solving hard problems, right? And feeling challenged in what he was doing. Some people call that learning, some people call it whatever, as we talk about in class. But I think there's something about falling in love with like just feeling challenged every day.
Mm,
And I felt that in my professional life, right?
mm,
Where it's like I knew I was done in consulting when I felt like I wasn't feeling challenged. And I was like, now I need a new job. And then I went to BC and then I felt challenged again, and then by the end of it was feeling not challenged again. I'm like, great, business school, right? So I think there's something to be said about that in terms of like figuring out what that thing is.
Mhm.
I don't know. I do think there's a little bit of an too much of an emphasis on the passion part of it. I mean, again, not to keep quoting Reza, but he said this in class today. He was like, "You guys all go into PE and consulting and whatever. Are you passionate about that?" I don't think so. I'm sure there are some people that are. So I think it just boils down to like, this is what I tried to do RC year. I probably wasn't as good at it as I would have liked to be RC year, but we all have a set of values
yeah.
that drive us. And I think in a place like HBS, it's very hard to stay grounded in those because you get so pulled in a thousand different directions. You see people around you doing things and you're like, oh my God, should I do this? You fall victim to peer pressure. Like there's just so much going on. And this is what I tell, RCs that ask me, I'm like, know what your North Star is, know what is important to you. And if you spend enough time thinking about it, your gut will tell you what you actually want to do. You just have to let it speak
Hmm.
and not get wrapped up in everything else because you can mute your gut and it's very easy to mute your gut.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to do RC year. But I think that would be the thing I would tell people.
That was something that came pretty late to me, at least.
Yeah.
So I value that a lot.
Yeah.
I found exactly what I wanted to, zone into or focus into more towards the summer, end
Yeah.
of summer actually. So it's good to hear that, and I hope the RCs are, like if they hear this, they should take that to heart and actually stick with that.
I think it was very well said. I think finding signal in noise is very difficult. Um, but yeah, knowing your values, staying grounded, knowing your North Star will really take you
Yeah.
um, far. And I think we'll probably end with like the question that we love to ask everyone, and
Okay.
it goes with the podcast, the unwritten case. 10 years down the line,
Ooh.
how do you see your case being framed?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would love to have a case about transforming the way people view mental health. And if I can do that in a country where it was an uphill battle, um, but if I can, for me, I would love a case about being the person that shifted how people view mental wellness and health and well-being. That would be maybe that's my North Star now.
That actually sounded pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that adds a third layer to it besides passion and business, being proud of, something
Yeah,
to be proud of.
yeah,
And
yeah. My one thing I always say is, I know what it feels like to be on the other side of it, and I'm like, if I can help, one other person not feel that way, then I know I've succeeded, and that's what I will be proud of. And now, if I can do that at scale, why not?
Thank you, Anisha.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having
It's
me.
been great to have you on the podcast, and stay tuned for the next one.